Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the OverSeers. My name's Pro Elias, and I'm joined as usual by my co host Nightwing. This is going to be our final episode before the Season 5 playoffs for the Overwatch League, and this is going to be quite interesting because not only do we have all the teams to rank in a pre playoff power rankings, but we also have a new patch to discuss, which was leaked and obviously covered by a lot of different media, websites, and all that stuff. So we need to go over this patch, and then based on this patch, we'll give you our thoughts on each of the teams and just rank them, just indicating how we think they'll do in the playoffs. So let's kick things off by talking about the patch, Nightwing. What are your overall thoughts to the approach behind this patch? Because obviously we've got Kiriko coming in for the first time in Overwatch 2 competitive history, and we've got nerfs to four heroes that have honestly been like really strong in this meta, almost too overpowered. So yeah, go on, you have the floor.
Yeah, I think basically, I think the Overwatch League is just, well, not even the Overwatch League. Blizzard is basically just trying to make a meta where they can showcase their new heroes. And previously it was the Jotes meta with Junker Queen, but then people got sick of watching that. So now they're going to move to a more dive centric sort of meta by nerfing Zarya. And obviously, d.va has also been balanced. So you might just see comps like ones featuring with the Winston. Um, you will still see Sojan in there, who is probably the strongest hero in the game, uh, especially now that Zarya, Sombra, and Genji have been nerfed. Uh, Again, in line with just Blizzard wanting to show off these new Overwatch 2 heroes. And you will also probably see Kiriko, though you might just see people default to the like Bap Lucio that people are currently playing. Um, so I think overall it's more of a showboaty sort of move from Blizzard to introduce this patch into the Overwatch League. I don't think it's really the epitome of balance by any means, but at least some of the broken heroes have been removed. That said, that will limit you to probably seeing Sojourn on basically every team in every single match, which I'm not sure I love too much, especially after seeing Sojourn already in every game in the actual game in Overwatch 2. So honestly, not a huge fan of this patch. They have made some like correct decisions by nerfing Sombra, who was really annoying to play against and to even watch. Tank players couldn't get too much value, but honestly, she was also a good counter to tanks, just because the tank role is the most busted role right now. Overall, like you basically cannot kill a tank whatsoever. Um, and if your tank is worse than the other one, then you just lose the game. So I think Sombra at least was able to uh, shift the balance of power into the hands of DPS and support players. But in this case, you just got a situation where you're going to see obviously tanks be the most important sort of part of a team comp again. Apart from the sojourn on the team, which will just get all the kills. Uh, I know this makes me sound really cynical about this patch notes, but overall, I think for the health of the game, the decisions they've made here are good in some sense. It's just that they don't go far enough, especially by just not nerfing probably the strongest hero in the game, which is Sojourn, just so that the Overwatch League and Blizzard can show off the new heroes Sojourn and Kiriko in these upcoming playoffs.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with pretty much everything there. I do think that it's it does make sense that Blizzard wants to show off their latest hero, especially considering that this is the first year that Overwatch 2 is being played in the Overwatch League. So that show offiness by Blizzard, like, hey, we've made a brand new game. It's completely free. You guys can come in and play all these awesome new characters, including this badass female Japanese warrior. Is it's just like it makes sense to me from a marketing perspective. From a gameplay perspective, I think it just depends on what we see when the matches actually begin. So far, I have no clue about the scrimbucks, so I can't really say anything about that right now. But I think maybe once we go through these changes, we'll get a better understanding of what the patch will entail. So let's kick things off and talk about the Sombra changes. First of all, which in which she's got her hack ability lockout duration reduced from 1.75 to 1.5 seconds. Then hacked enemies are no longer valid targets for hacking for the duration of the effect. And hack damage multiplier has been reduced from 40 to 25%. Frankly, I think she's out of the meta at this point. Like, I don't think the second change makes a massive difference because the duration of the hack was already sufficient for the duration of a 1v1. If you had to just come back and hack the target once again, you were probably just either doing something wrong or the enemy team was not denying you enough. So that's just a matter of like skill levels over there. I think the first and third changes do definitely take Sombra down a lot of notches um, because that 0.25 seconds difference is, I think it can make a like it can be seen like affecting like the tanks or the any hero that she hacks basically because 0.25 seconds is a massive like span of time for a fast-paced game like Overwatch. So I'm sure, even though I've not played on this patch, I'm pretty sure that some players will feel the benefit after they hack that, oh, I'm able to like use this cooldown a little bit faster. I'm able to escape. I have lesser close calls against the Sombra that's hacked me. And obviously the damage multiplier reducing from 40 to 25%, that's the biggest blow in this entire set of nerfs for Sombra. So I think to be effective, she essentially just has to go for the backline, hack somebody, and take them out like a Zenyatta. But other than that, she's not gonna have too much of an effect, in team play. Like if you're a solo queue player, you can still probably do really well with Sombra. But I don't think that Overwatch League players are going to be able to utilize her to that extent.
So I think the main thing with Sombra here is if you look at these three, uh, different nerfs. The first one, where it goes from 1.75 to 1.5 seconds, that's basically just makes it easier for heroes that have get out of jail free cards for abilities such as Wraith Form or Fade or Recall, or even like movement abilities such as Genji's Dash. It makes them just able to escape the tool more easily. The second one targets basically getting chain hacked after EMP. Basically, you get EMP'd and then you get hacked. Um, that is basically the function of the second nerf. And then yeah, the third one, like you said, Prelios, it does reduce survivability by a lot because now it puts the damage multiplier around the same as what they've currently got on Zen for Discord, because Discord has also gone down from 30% in Overwatch 1 to 25% in Overwatch 2. So I think overall this will make Sombra just less viable. You'd probably see something like a Sojourn plus Tracer combo uh, at the highest level. Tracer isn't that good probably in the rest of the game, so you'll probably see Sojourn plus some other hero everywhere else. But this does also open up the possibility for teams that like to experiment uh, with heroes such as the Echo or the Ash. And so, in that sense, it does open up the meta a bit more, and you won't just see constant usage of either Tracer Sombra or Sojourn Sombra. So, I think in that sense, it's a good change. It's just that, like earlier, I feel like it doesn't go far enough. Uh, just because I do think Sojourn is incredibly busted.
Yeah, that's fair enough. I do think that we should have had some Sojourn nerfs, but yeah, I guess Blizzard did want to show off Sojourn as well because she is, after all, one of the Overwatch 2 only heroes. So anyway, let's move on and talk about Genji. He's had his maximum ammo reduced from 30 to 24. So essentially, for those of you that can't do the math, instead of having 10 right clicks in one clip, they are just going to have 8 right or left clicks, whichever you use. And the shuriken damage has been reduced from 29 to 27. And on the face of it, I don't think these are like really strong nerfs. I think they will take like Genji down a peg, but in most situations he's still going to be viable. I think the only downside that really comes from these nerfs is that he's going to charge his Dragon Blade a little bit slower. Uh, Otherwise, like his strengths are pretty much still crystal clear. Like he can poke at range, he can duel up close, and he can really go in for those clean up kills with his dash. Like dash reset after dash reset. That's just gonna help you clean up fights much faster, right? So I think his value still lies in the same places. I think for those teams that were playing Genji just because he was a strong character can still default back to the Tracer. So like you said, Nightwing, Sojourn Tracer is the DPS combo that I honestly seeing being viable a lot. But yeah, do you think these Genji nerfs aren't that bad, just like me, or do you have any different thoughts?
I'm considering that Genji's damage was at 28 in Overwatch 1, and this is below that. Does make it seem like this may actually hit Genji players fairly hard, even though it's only a reduction in 2 damage, which is not that much. I think the repercussions of this will be that people will generally favor the tracer, um, because currently this I think does change a few breakpoints in the game where if you required X amount of right clicks or left clicks plus a dash to kill someone, now you need maybe X plus one right clicks. So that may not seem like a huge deal, but I think in certain breakpoints, especially against 250 HP heroes, if I remember correctly, this should make somewhat of a difference. So I think you will probably see people default back to the tracer. Uh, but it should, like I said again, just open up more opportunities for other heroes. But if you got a player that's just really cracked on the Ash or on the Widow or on the Echo, um, then you can actually experiment with those picks, because Genji has is probably like the second highest picked hero after Sojourn currently, even in like top 500, and the Overwatch League itself, apart from Sombra. So I think in that sense, it does make sense that they would nerf him, especially in an Overwatch League patch. This should help open up the meta, and also considering that we're expecting a sort of heavy dive meta, this just makes it less painful for supports to exist. The entire team will have to coordinate their dive really well, instead of just a lone, pocketed Genji going and 1v1ing the entire team. So, in that sense, I think it's a decent change.
Yeah, I agree over there. And how do you think this goes with the Zarya change? Because Zarya Genji has been a pretty good duo in Overwatch 2 so far. Because you can just bubble the Genji when he goes in, he just gets like an additional 2.5 seconds of staying time in the back line. In that much time, he can poke down and probably finish off a target and then get back to your team. So that synergy has been quite good, especially executed by a few teams. So that now Zarya has had her barrier duration reduced from 2.5 to 2 seconds, and the barrier cooldown increased from 10 to 11 seconds. So, do you think this really is going to affect her too much? Because I feel like the barrier, I feel like the combination of this um, does make it difficult for her to like help her teammates go more aggressive. But I think if you're using your bubbles more selfishly, I don't think it's like it depends on the play style of the Zarya. Like, I can definitely see your Hanbins and your Hotbars and your Banars still playing the Zarya after these nerfs. But yeah, what do you think about this?
Um, so the original sort of barrier duration was 25% more, if you'd like to think of it that way. It was one fourth more than what it is now, or the other way to go about it is saying it's 20% less now. Either way, that is a fairly sizable number, if I'm being honest. um, and it didn't just if you see that what Zarya players are getting away with currently in ranked, just because of that last sort of teetering second, you will see that it makes a lot of difference, because you also have to imagine that that 0.5 second duration is when a Zarya can get, 0.5 seconds of damage in. Considering the amount of damage per second she's doing, that half second does add up to maybe even making a difference between actually landing a kill or not landing a kill. I think it's definitely very substantial, and it also just helps other tanks to be more viable, rather than just the Zarya completely dominating. I think you'll see teams that specialize in some other types of comps, such as London with their rush comp. They will be able to take advantage of this, and not just get instantly countered by a Zarya just holding their shift ability over and over again. So I think overall it's a good change, and you will see more meta diversity. You'll see the Sigma come in more often instead of just on Circuit Royale. Uh, any other map or any other point that has longer sightlines, you should be able to uh, sort of pick up heroes like the Winston for the dive or Sigma for long range sightlines, or the Ryan just to close the gap and rush in with the Lucio speed boost. So I think this does ideally help the meta just diversify a bit. Uh, you will maybe still see Zarya here and there, but I don't think it should be as prevalent as before. And it will be interesting for teams to hopefully not default to a singular comp, assuming no other tank is completely busted, and just fall back to their signature styles. Because I think that's when Overwatch League is most fun, is when each team has their own identity, they have their own style, they have their own comfort picks that they rely on to make huge plays. I think that's when Overwatch League strikes, just shines the brightest instead of one boring comp all the time. Obviously, goats enjoyers, jotes enjoyers, etc., will argue with me on that, uh, because there is obviously the conversation of defining one singular comp and seeing who's the best at it. But I think in a playoffs environment, when you in a new game, I would love to see many different styles come out of different teams.
Yeah, that's really fair because, like, just like I said, right, there will be some like Zarya players that either are just really good Zaryas or they have a more selfish playstyle that will default to the hero a little bit more. Like, you probably won't see someone like Koluj moving on to the Zarya or someone, for example. But like I said, Hanbin, Hotba, or maybe even Smurf, just because he's become really good at Zarya, they could bust out the hero every now and then, maybe play a Reaper comp alongside it. I don't honestly know yet. But let's move on and talk about d.va, who's the final hero that's been changed in this patch. Her fusion cannon spread has been increased from 3.5 to 3.75, and her booster's impact damage reduced from 25 to 15. Now, as someone who plays a ton of d.va, I can say that the second change is actually going to be fairly impactful because, like, when you like launched yourself at someone, you did the booster's damage, that, let's say 25, then you do a melee, that's 30 more, that's 55 damage, and then after a little bit you can melee again, so that gives you 85 damage, and then you just have to focus down the target. Like, that 85 to 75 change does make a big difference, especially if the character has a smaller hitbox. So I can tell you that there will be a decent bit more openings for players to like peel for their teammates when a diva dives them, and even with the fusion cannon spread being increased, that's going to mean that diva has to be much closer to her opponents to actually like burst them down faster. So I does think that this I think this takes diva out of the meta. I don't think she's going to be played a bunch. Like, if I wanted more damage upon engaging, like on a dive, I would probably play Wrecking Ball or Winston, mostly Winston. But yeah, essentially, I don't think Diva is going to be a really popular pick. Um, I don't even know if we'll see like just top tier Diva players still play her. Like, her defense matrix still exists, but I don't think just having the defense matrix be strong is enough to keep Diva strong. Like, these two abilities matter a lot as well. So yeah, those are my thoughts on the change, Nightwing.
I think considering that Zarya has been nerfed and Zarya was the only real counter to D.va, every other tank just sort of fell by the wayside when trying to contest D.va from what you've seen in most of your probably your own games as well as in Overwatch League games. I think there is some wiggle room for D.va to potentially be viable if she turns out to actually be better than the Winston in scrims, for example, or for particular teams that just do not have a very impressive Winston player. That said, I think these nerfs do obviously take her down a bit. Um, you have to keep in mind though that this is not the same diva as there was in Overwatch 1. Like you said, Proteus, there is a really long defense matrix ability that diva has now that can mitigate a ton of damage. So I think in some particular situations you might be able to see the diva actually come out just because of that insane damage mitigation. Um, the other thing is that Diva can actually now, melee twice very consistently instead of, her flight being stopped right after you melee. So I think that makes it so that Diva players are able to still do a good amount of burst damage even without the boosters. It's just that the booster damage plus double melee was an insane amount of initial engagement damage, and then it was almost inevitable that you would kill whoever you dived. I think there is a lot of subtlety here where you'll just have to wait and watch with what the Overwatch League's teams cook up in the meta. I think it's hard to really predict, but I feel like at least d.va will not be the uh, probably the dominant force. I am expecting the Winston or maybe even the Reinhardt Rush compositions uh, if everything goes in London's favor. Um, I think overall this should just even out the playing field a bit better for uh, most of the tanks in the game, apart from Junker Queen.
Oh yeah, Junker Queen's definitely right now not in very good shape. But yeah, that pretty much covers the patch notes, and we can probably just move on to the power rankings because I think those will take a little bit longer than this. So yeah, before we get to the power rankings, guys, if you've been watching so far, do let us know your thoughts on the patch down below. Remember that it's not just these four changes. Kiriko is being added to the mix, and also leave us your power rankings down in the comment section. They don't have to be close to our power rankings just for the heck of it. Please share your own thoughts, and yeah, we'll have fun discussing it. And if you want to discuss more directly with us, do join our Discord as well, which we'll link in the description. So yeah, let's start off with the power rankings. Um, so we have got 12 teams. As you can see, I've got those 12 lovely teams over here, just faded out. Then three tier breaks, and then the teams that didn't qualify for the playoffs. Um, let's start off as usual, I think, with the bottom. Um, and I want to throw a couple of names out there, and we'll see, Nightwing, what you think about them. Um, the Toronto Defiant, the Florida Mayhem, the Hangzhou Spark, and the Philly Fusion. Go.
Uh, no, there's nothing to go there. I think those are all completely fair. Honestly, I think the easiest thing is just to put all four up, and then we can arrange the order after that.
Sure. Where did it go? Yep. Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Go on.
So my thoughts on this is that uh, probably I would at least give Philly the sort of benefit of the doubt, just because they have actually had some success in sort of regional tournaments, and they do just seem to step up in these sort of tournament situations, especially their DPS line. I think now that tanks are nerfed a little bit, you might actually see uh, probably the Philly Fusion get their DPS more on the steering wheel. And Belastria is disappointing sometimes, but I'm not quite convinced that he's uh, so bad that he won't be able to keep up. That said, I think probably I would go with one of the other three. Uh, Personally, if I had to go with one of these teams to go at the very bottom, I might just go with the Hangzhou Spark.
Okay. Let's say Spark. And yeah, can you just tell us a little bit about why you think the Spark is below all of these teams?
I think the issue with the Spark is that while they have some really, exciting players such as Alpha E and Shy, and they have made good plays here and there, overall as a team, they've just not really succeeded in my eyes, at least. They've just been a sort of punching bag for all the good teams in APAC, and even the Philly Fusion have punched down on them here and there. I just feel like the Hangzhou Spark have not actually demonstrated any success whatsoever, and that's in a region where they should have been able to at least stand out a little bit against other teams, such as the Charge or the Valiant. But even against those, I'm not super confident about the Hangzhou Sparks odds, because the Charge had a resurgence in the latter half of the season, and honestly, if it weren't for the earlier half of the season when they were completely failing, I might even see a world where the Guangzhou Charge would genuinely be uh, in this sort of playoffs lineup in over the Hangzhou Spark just because of how completely unimpressive the Spark were, apart from their, you know, couple of decent DPS players.
Yeah, like frankly, I agree with all of those reasons. I think I'm okay with keeping the spark at the end. I think the main problem here is that they love playing the Zarya, and unfortunately, Zarya's being nerfed to like a decent extent. They obviously still have Gusho's Winston to rely on, and obviously with Genji being nerfed, they can play the Sojourn Tracer, which is what they've been playing as of late, right? You can see Pineapple being put on the Tracer, and like Shy being put on the Sojourn, which is their like best combo, but usually complemented by Zarya or a D.va, both of which have been nerfed. So and it's also a little bit like worth mentioning that the Spark love playing Brigitte like way more than the other teams. They run the Ana Brig like more regularly than the others. You see them put Neko on main support and just roll with that. And like it's just not a fantastic look. Like sure they qualified for these playoffs, but I think it was mainly because Zarya and D.va was so strong. So even if they do have the Sojourn Tracer, like sure they will be competitive, but I don't think they're gonna go too far. And yeah, I do want to advocate for Philly being second last though. Um, and look, I honestly am someone who has no faith in the Fusion at this point. They are the most inconsistent team in the league, and personally, as an analyst, I value consistency a lot. Like no matter what your peaks have been, if you're going into an unknown meta, I will not have faith in you if you have been really inconsistent, which the Fusion have. It's impossible to predict if they're going to win a certain match. Like their most consistent look was probably during the Junker Queen meta, when they were running the Brig Lucio along with the Genji Sojourn. Like, but you're not gonna have Fury on the Junker Queen right now. Like he was making good mechanical plays there. Um, you're not gonna have that much of the Brig Lucio. Obviously, you won't have any Brig Lucio. I think if Junker Queen's not in. So the only saving grace for the Fusion that puts them above the Spark, in my opinion, is that they can, still run Zest on the Genji or on the Tracer, and they can run MN3 on the Sojourn. Most importantly, I think the DPS are their strongest suits, and like Genji and Sojourn have been bread and butter for Zest and MN3, so that shouldn't be a problem really. And Ana is still going to be really strong. I think Ana's actually buffed by these nerfs because like Genji has less of a chance of poking her down or finishing her off. Then you have Sombra with just less hack time on her. You've got D.va who can like go aggressive on her less, and you have Zarya who's able to cleanse less often and give more openings for the Ana to land an anti or a sleep. So I think Ana's actually hyper buffed by this meta. I think we are going to see her a lot, um, unless Kiriko just somehow counters her. But that said, yeah, the fusion will look good, better than the Spark, but yeah, I think they also make an early exit. So yeah, is this ranking fine for you?
Yeah, I think that's completely fair. Honestly, despite the Philly Fusion having done some good things, the fact of the matter is that I still don't like their support line. I think them sometimes playing Fixa on Ana is pretty much dreadful. It's almost too ugly to look at times. It's because of how unimpressive it is. But that said, I don't even love their actual flex support player, which is Aim God. No matter how jacked he is, he's still just not that good of a player. Uh, and that has also reflected just based off of the teams he's played on in the past, in the Overwatch League. Literally, the best thing AimGod has ever done is get carried by Decay in the 2020 playoffs, uh,
Ouch.
and and then has just done nothing before or after that. Um, you know, Regardless of whatever small stint he had in contenders in 2021, I don't even want to talk about that. Um, yeah, Bellistria isn't that impressive. Fury is going to struggle because he is essentially, and I hate to say this because I love Fury, but he is essentially only really good when d.va is good. I mean, he's okay on Sigma, but he is essentially a d.va player.
Yikes.
Uh, and 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 he's and d.va is nerfed, and I just don't feel like they're going to really be. able to execute on the Winston, just because Balestria is not that great of a player, if I'm being honest, especially against most of the playoff teams. Um, so I think there's just not a lot of chances for the Philly Fusion to really come out with this. If you compare them to the Toronto Defiant, I feel like Hotbar still has more looks than either Fury or Balestria. Uh, Obviously, I don't think they're really going to do that great on the Winston either, but they should still be able to cook up something. Florida has someone who I think is a pretty good tank, better than what the Philly Fusion has to offer, honestly. Uh, Despite the sort of DPS diff that the Philly Fusion might be able to provide here and there, but that's just not consistent. Just because in Overwatch 2, your tank has to be good, and currently, I just don't feel like the Philly Fusion has that or the support line going for them. So I think this is a pretty fair placement for the Philly Fusion.
Yeah, and honestly, Fury fans, please stop dialing 911. It's really not that hard of a take. But yeah, I think we can move on and talk about the rank 10th team. So, which one do you think it should be between the Defiant and the Mayhem?
That's a hard one, honestly. I think if I had to go with one of these teams, I would probably put the Toronto Defiant below the Florida Mayhem, just because I feel like I believe in someone more than I believe in the tank line of the Defiant. I think Hotba was good on the Zarya for sure, but Zarya is just not going to be as good in this meta, right? And that's where I think someone can come in. He is insanely flexible, especially for a rookie, tank player. Uh, and I have liked most of his tank play, apart from a few selections here and there. I think overall he's a pretty coachable player, and he works well with his team. I think he should be able to, get into this landscape of these varied tank picks. I think considering that the teams will only have 5 days to actually practice on this patch and figure out what sort of the use case for each of these tanks will be, I think someone considering that he is so flexible will be one of the players that might be able to figure it out. Uh, Toronto, on the other hand, I mean, Hotba has always been this, super aggro, almost DPS like player. He actually did even play DPS here and there in season one, if some people remember, but
Season 2 as well.
season two as well. But the thing is that he is not really the sort of tanky tank, I guess, that you really want. And Muse hasn't really been, impressive either. I also think the Toronto Defiant are. Uh, have been throughout the entire season just entirely confused on whether to play finale or although, and Hisu just continues to have a very mid performance. He's not really hitting those highs that he did in season three, uh, and he didn't really do much in season four either, to be honest. So I think currently it's not like the DPS line are huge difference makers either. They've got a solid support line, obviously. I can't sing the praises of Twilight and Chorong like every single episode if they don't actually do anything as a like complete team unit. So I think I would probably put the Florida Mayhem above the Toronto Defiant.
No, yeah, I completely agree over there. I think the Toronto Defiant have looked at their best this season when the meta has been more teamwork reliant than mechanics reliant. Yeah, mechanics reliant. Like you saw them go to the semifinals during the summer showdown, right? Which one was at Toronto, where they had the home crowd advantage? Was that the summer showdown? Or was
I
that the
think
mid,
so.
mid? Yeah, that was the summer showdown. So you saw them playing that Jungle Queen composition to a really high level, right? With the Brig Lucio, then you saw the Aldo Genji just popping off really hard. But I think that's where the strengths end. Like, sure, they've got Twilight on Ana, which is an absolutely cracked pick. They've got Chorong, who can play the Lucio Brig, and honestly, even the Zen pretty well. Then they've got Finale and Aldo able to play the Genji. But I think with the Zarya and d.va nerfs, Hotba is evidently nerfed, and like he's been kind of the mainstay tank for this team because they've like playing him a lot on the Zarya, the d.va, the Junker Queen, and all three of these heroes have like Junker Queen is in an absolutely terrible position in the meta, but Zarya and d.va have also been nerfed. So I am pretty certain that we are going to be seeing more Winston, maybe even more Doomfist. I'm not entirely sure, but I don't think this is Toronto's meta. Like, it could have been if Hisu was good at Sojourn, but he's probably the worst Sojourn out of all of the teams that are playing in this bracket. Like, I don't think anyone like comes close to being as poor of a Sojourn or as inconsistent of a Sojourn as he's been this season, unfortunately. Um, on the other side, the Florida Mayhem, someone's Winston is absolutely cracked. I do see Winston coming back a little bit into this meta. Hydron's Sojourn is probably one of the best that we have in the league right now. Checkmate's Genji, absolutely solid, teamwork oriented. Then they've like still got obviously Checkmate's Tracer, also quite good. Ana again, hyper strong. Rupal, good at the hero. Somajat, good at the hero. Um, yeah, I think if the meta allows for Lucio to be like discarded, I think then this team can actually make a pretty deep playoff run. If Lucio is going to be a mainstay in the meta, I think that's a bit of a problem. If Sir Majet is expected to play it, if Anamo is going to play it, that's still fine. But all in all, I think this is a fair position for the Mayhem. They will definitely do better than the Toronto Defiant just because of like the additional flexibility and consistency. So yeah, I think that's pretty um, thoroughly discussed. Uh, all right, let's talk about the rank eighth team, and the names that I want to throw out for this Nightwing are the Atlanta Rain, the Houston Outlaws, and the London Spitfire. So yeah, which one do you think should be?
I honestly think just because Zarya and d.va are out, I don't think uh, it should be the London Spitfire. If Zarya and d.va were still meta, I might just put the London Spitfire here. I think I would probably go with the Atlanta Rain here, just because one of the most decent things they did was with Hawk on Doom, but then Doom's not good at all. Um, and Hawk can also play d.va. Gator doesn't exist. He's just out there buying or selling NFTs or whatever. So he's basically not on the lineup. Uh, I don't really think Hawk can play the monkey. I don't really think Hawk can play. I mean, he can play the Sigma, obviously, but uh, I don't see them playing the ball if that ends up being good, though that's unlikely. Uh, so I just feel like the Atlanta Rain won't really be able to execute. Obviously, players like Kai are good hit scan players and can also play Sojourn, etc. really well. Uh, but it's just that tank diff for me where I don't see it happening. I feel like they might not be able to use players like Vigilante either. Ultraviolet had a very good start to the season, but I don't really know if he's going to be enough to cut it. Currently, I think the Atlanta Rain definitely have a good shot, getting into even the top four if they really pop off, because I feel like they've already like always had this system of doing pretty well in the playoffs, which I will have to give them credit for. But it's just that I don't currently see that happening. Just based off of their tank line not really being very well suited for this upcoming meta, I feel. Uh, I think one of the good things you might see out of the Atlanta Rain, though, is that they've got two really good flex support players. So if Kiriko does actually end up being meta, they're in a pretty good spot to actually pick up that hero and use it in their comps. Um, but if Kiriko doesn't end up being meta, you still got, Ultraviolet who can play an excellent Ana. You can see, obviously, Vigilante or Ultraviolet play a really good BAP as well. So there is definitely potential for the Atlanta to move up from here. But this is probably where I would put them, just because I'm a little bit cynical of what their tank line can achieve.
So I was pretty I was undecided between the Atlanta Rain and the Spitfire actually. Um, I would probably put the Spitfire under here, just temporarily placing them here. I would probably put the Spitfire under the Atlanta Rain. Um, First of all, I think even if Zarya and d.va have been nerfed, I don't think. So I think Hawk is one of those players that can probably still make the Zarya work. He's not like a carry level player. But the thing is, the team structure isn't based on Hawk carrying. It's mainly based on Venom, Speedly, and Kai making the plays. Maybe even Ultraviolet and Vigilante. Um, Hawk plays more of a supporting role within the team structure. So I don't think these nerfs hit him as hard as some of the other players that manage those heroes. I also think that with Sombra being nerfed, um, I think Doomfist has a potential to be situationally playable. Um, because honestly, he's one of those uh, characters where if you can manage your cooldowns well, if you can manage your engagement timings well, and just play with your team, you can get a ton of value. And like he was still pretty like he was situationally playable before Sombra became overpowered, and especially with like Zarya also being less effective, d.va being less. d.va was one of those heroes that could counter the Doomfist. Just fly in his face after he disengages from a fight and just like burst him down or at least get him so low that his team gets one less engaged. So I think Hawk's Doom, which was one of the better ones overall in the league, has the potential to be effective. I don't necessarily think Hawk's Winston was bad. Again, he can't carry, but he's not meant to carry in this team structure. Whereas if you look at the London Spitfire, right, um, I think they're pretty much going to want to run the rush again, which is unsurprising because they are really good at it. I do see potential for Reinhardt to be good in this meta. He was like the reason why he wasn't being played in rush comps by most teams was because Zarya and Junker Queen were just stronger. With them now like nerfed, I think he can really bust out. Hardy can burst out the Rhine a lot more. Like obviously they have Sparkle's Sojourn, which is pretty good. They have Backbones May, but again the May is situational. And on top of that, I'm not really a big fan of London's flex support play. I don't think Landon or Khan have been exceptional this season. I do think Admiral's been a good main support, but I think in a meta where I foresee Ana being like pretty much the cornerstone of team compositions, at least on the support front, I think it's going to be crucial to have a playmaking flex support. I can see Ultraviolet or Vigilante being that for the Atlanta Rain. I'm not so sure if I can rely on the London Spitfire to do that in compositions where Reinhardt, like if, in compositions that don't involve Reinhardt, because you genuinely cannot play Reinhardt everywhere in Overwatch 2. So yeah, that's kind of the reason. I also think the Rain have a better DPS line overall. They've got more flexibility with like a hyperflex like Spirally. They've got Venom who's great on the Tracer, which is probably going to be more prevalent. They've got Kai on the Sojourn, which is like a little bit inconsistent this season, but still good. And just Nero as backup. So yeah, it's like I can't say for sure which team I would put up, but probably the Spitfire just because I have more faith in like Atlanta's flex supports as well as the flexibility of the DPS line. So yeah, it's your call, Nightwing. I'm honestly okay with putting either.
I think that's extremely fair. Um, I think there's just some sort of magic factor that the London Spitfire have at times that makes their teamwork work, even though I honestly do not believe in their DPS players, but somehow they make it work. And it's so baffling to me. I think it's just that they really know how to execute that particular rush comp. But like you said, Brodus, cannot be executed everywhere, right? Surely they cannot do that everywhere. Um, and yeah, I mean, following that logic, I think it's fair to put the London Spitfire below because I don't really think, in my heart of hearts, that Backbone and Sparkle can, beat Kai and whoever else. Though I haven't really been impressed with Venom this season either, to be honest. Um, I think probably it's fine for the London Spitfire to go down here. And if nothing else, this is a team that loves to prove you wrong, loves to, steal wins from teams that should on paper be better than the London Spitfire. So if nothing else, this gives them the opportunity to come and prove us wrong, I guess. And then we can put the Atlanta in above that.
Yeah, sure. And by all means, I mean London have proven almost everyone wrong this season by even making the playoffs. Like a lot of analysts were putting them at rank 20. I think we were one of the few like podcasts or shows to put them at like 12 or 13. Um, just had a bunch of faith in the players and the coaches. So anyway, not to brag about it too much, although yeah, we were right. We will move on and talk about the rank six team now. Um, and it's got to be the Houston Outlaws, right? Because I feel like there's a bit of a tier break between the Outlaws and the rest of the teams.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I might just push for the Outlaws being below the Atlanta Rain. These teams are
Ooh.
fairly close. Uh, I feel like Dante will struggle despite him flexing and doing a really good job throughout the season. I feel like now his reign of terror on the tank role finally surely has to end, right? Because I'll be honest, Doge is just completely unimpressive. I didn't love his gameplay whatsoever. Uh, and at this point, with both the fact that, Dante's playstyle as a fairly aggressive diva at times is being nerfed, uh, him pulling out the old 2016 diva might not really work anymore. The Zarya won't really work either. I don't feel like the Doom will work either. Uh, so I feel like the heroes that will actually be playable on tank just will not be able to be executed properly by the Houston Outlaws. Uh, and so I might even push for the Houston Outlaws to be below Atlanta. I think all, to some degree they have similar issues. It's just that I can still believe in Hawk flexing onto the heroes that I'm guessing will be meta more than I believe that Dante will be able to. And if they bring in players like those for the tank role, I feel like the Houston Outlaws will just flop as it did when they did try to play with that player. So I think it's probably a fair bet for me personally to put the Houston Outlaws even below the Atlanta Rain. That said, it's really your call, Proilius.
No, I am okay with that. Like the teams are pretty close. I think like even Houston's like best looks have come from Dante's Doomfist early on in the season. Um, they do have a pretty good DPS lineup. You know, they've consistently got the Pelican Merit DPS duo performing at like really good levels for the most part. You know, Pelicans Genji or his Tracer, they are both quite good. Um, I think Merit Sojourn has been surprisingly good. Like he he might have been able to be one of the Rookie of the Year candidates if this team had actually gone really deep into some tournaments. Um, but anyway, I do like the support line as well. They've got Iris obviously. Then they've got Lastro, who's Lastro has been a super impressive like transitioned main support. Like for someone who would just be famous for the Zenyatta and sometimes the Ana, he's just been a fantastic Lucio, like peeling for his backline, going aggressive when the team wants to. So hats off to him there. And I don't think they're going to play Lep and Doge at all. Like they haven't played them in this meta, in the latest meta, I mean. And yeah, with the Zarya and D.va nerfs, again, Dante is a little bit nerfed. But like I mentioned for Hawk, I do think his Doomfist has potential to come back in and wreak havoc. But it just depends on the given day. So although I think that the Atlanta Rain are like a more inconsistent team than the Outlaws, as of late, the Outlaws have probably been more inconsistent than Atlanta. So I think your placement is fair here, Nightwing. Um, all right, let's break into the top five. Um, and for rank five, I wanna talk about either the San Francisco Shock or the Shanghai Dragons. So yeah, I'll let you share your thoughts first.
I think for this slot, I would probably go with the Shanghai Dragons, despite them having some amazing players on their roster. Uh, I think there's definitely a world where you do see the Shock flop, and honestly, I'd probably put the Shock right after this team. Personally, it's just that the Shanghai Dragons have done nothing too impressive in my eyes. I feel like they've got players with a bit like a lot of pedigree, such as Lip and Fleta, and basically everyone else on the roster. I could name every single one of them, and they'd be close to legendary status. Apart from Who Are You, sadly. And Who Are You won't be able to make the plays that he did now with Genji nerfed as well. So I think at this point you're just waiting for Shanghai to also not play the Sombra. So at this point they're just left with what, like Sojourn, which other players can play probably better. Uh, You're left with the Tracer, who other players can also play quite well on other teams, and you're left with the Echo, I guess, which yeah, Fleta is pretty good at, but so are other people. Even Pelican on the Outlaws can play a pretty good Echo. I feel like the tanks on Shanghai personally haven't really impressed me that much this year. I think they are like supremely good players in their own right in the past of Overwatch League, but this year I haven't personally been impressed so much by them that I would consider them putting in them in the top three spots. So I think this is where the Shanghai Dragons can lie for now, despite them being defending champions. I feel like them transitioning to Overwatch 2 has taken off their sort of edge advantage a little bit, and other teams have sort of taken over. I think with APAC, considering it's a limited sort of pool of teams, it is a bit easy to say that they're not at the very top, so they must be bad, just because Seoul has been a bit better than them. But I think this is still a fair spot to put the Dragons in.
Yeah, yeah, I actually agree with this exact placement that you said, with the Dragons coming in at fifth and the Shock coming in at fourth. Um, the reason why I don't think the Shanghai Dragons can compete with the absolute uh, top tier of this bracket is because they just like they have lacked that like absolutely hyper dangerous hive mind like kind of uh, how do you say trait this season. um, I did say this before the season even began, but with one player being out of the mix and transitioning to 5v5, comms would certainly be an issue for the Dragons when Fate was out, because he's kind of the leader of the team. And the role of the off tank, especially in their lineup, was crucial because while Void was the off tank, he just played more of a supporting role. Whereas if you're playing tank now, you in general have to be the aggressor. In general, you have to be the one initiating fights and making the plays, like at least trying to, because tank is just a really busted role, like Nightwing said earlier. Um, but Shanghai has been able to showcase that. Sure, they are still the second best APAC team, but again, Zarya's gone, Diva's gone, and Void's been their main player. So they have to transition back now to Fate being on the lineup. And sure, he has played Winston, like every now and then for this team, and it's looked good. I won't lie, but again, Genji's nerfed. Even though they will probably still play the Genji because Huayu is just really good at the hero. They will want to play Sojourn just because Sojourn is obviously going to still be really strong. She's going to be OP. So they will play Lip on the Sojourn. Fair enough, he's really good. And I feel like they'll go for the Winston Ana Lucio. Because that just seems like bread and butter for the Shanghai Dragons. You know, Izayaki on Ana, Lee Jae-gon on Lucio, Fate on Winston. And like it seems like a band of merry men marching through the playoff bracket. And honestly, I do think they can get like pretty far, but I think they are just lacking that wow factor and lacking that consistency which can help them beat these other teams. Like I obviously can't predict how they'll do against the NA teams too much, just because we haven't seen them clash a lot. But all in all, I don't feel like it's the same formidable, unbeatable Shanghai Dragons that we saw last year. Like for heaven's sake, we saw Seoul Dynasty beat them quite a few times this year already. So yeah, that's the reason why Shanghai is in at fifth. And yeah, I guess we can talk about the San Francisco Shock now, Nightwing, and I'll let you go first as a Shock fan over here.
Okay, so I mean, there's no denying the Shock have an insane player in Proper. The poor guy's eyes have had trouble functioning lately. He's having a little bit of trouble. But that said, the Shock have still done fairly well. I think them using Mikey here and there is basically a complete throw, and I think if they put in Mikey, then they will just lose that map pretty much instantly. Uh, I'm very sad to say, but they should just not be playing that person. Um, Kalush, though, very solid tank. Striker coming in with a pretty good resurgence. Uh, Sam is sort of MIA currently. He's missing in action, but that's okay. Kilo has been okay this season. He hasn't been, top tier, but he's okay as well. Overall, the DPS line extremely solid. One of their tanks is very good and very flexible. I think he may struggle just because of the way the meta will be. I think teams that have a sort of Winston specialist might just take them over, because if they do genuinely try to put in Mikey for the Winston, then I'm going to be very disappointed, honestly. I think Kaluja's performance on the Winston in the earlier part of the season was okay, and the Shock did obviously go basically lossless apart from the tournament playoffs, even when Kaluj was on the Winston. Uh, so it's not like, he put up an extremely bad performance. But now that the season has sort of extended on for so long, I think other teams that actually have players that have focused on that particular hero might just come out on top. Uh, Other teams that will play the Rhine, such as London Spitfire, also have a sort of specialist in that area. I think Kaluj in this particular sort of patch might just be left as a very vague generalist instead of someone that can really specialize. And that's why I think the Shock doesn't really have an edge here. I do think they will be able to put up an exceptional Kiriko performance. I have that much faith in Violet and Finn. Um, I think Violet's been playing an excellent Lucio this year. Um, and also just an exceptional Babs comp alongside Finn. I think in terms of supports, the Shock are basically rock solid no matter what comes to them. Despite what I thought of the Violet Lucio just last year, I am genuinely extremely hyped to see them perform in the playoffs, because I think this is probably one of the best support lines that we've got in the entire league currently. Um, I just feel like the Shock don't really have the X factor currently, and I think Striker has the potential to let the team down um, as well. I feel like Proper may just continue with whatever issues he's currently having with his health or eyes, or I don't know what the exact specifics of it are, but it's just another unstable variable that makes me believe in the Shock taking all of it for the three-peat, a little bit less. That said, I think they're still obviously very, very high up in these rankings, and they do actually have a lot of potential to pull things off. It's just that the other teams are a little less concerning in different ways. They don't have the equivalent of a Mikey that they can put in and fail, unlike the Shock. So I think that just makes it a little less likely for the Shock to be able to take it all the way. That said, I think it's also very, very possible for really anyone in this top five, top six thing to have a pretty good chance of actually being the champion of the Overwatch League Season 5.
Yeah, I completely agree with all your points once again. It's almost like we have a hive mind as well, but yeah, just some additional points here, because if I were Krusty, right, and I wanted to win the championship, what would I do? I would probably um, just ask my team to focus on a single strategy, because historically that's what the Shock have been good at, perfecting a single composition rather than playing 50 different things in a single meta. Sure, they have done that and still been the best team. Look back to season 2 stage 4. Like it was the first like Orisa Hog meta, and the Shock, like if you guys remember, they had like 4 DPS. They had like Architect, Striker, Sinatra, and Rascal, and they were just rotating in those 4 DPS to play different heroes. But those players were asked to focus on just a couple of heroes max. You know, if they can do that once again, like maybe put proper just on the Genji. Like I get that Genji's been nerfed, but it's proper Genji. Like I don't think it's gonna take too big of a hit. Maybe you can take Striker's Tracer if it's really good. Like that's a pretty big if. I don't know at the moment, but I think Striker does his best when he's just confined to a niche. Like you can't spread him too thin and say, "Hey Striker, I'm gonna need you to play Tracer, and also practice your Sombra, and maybe even come in and play the Cass and the Sojourn." Like that's just not what's gonna get the best out of Striker. You just make him play that Tracer, help him get integrated with your team, and he's gonna do a brilliant job. I think if Shock does something like Genji Tracer, maybe alongside like a Winston, or I honestly don't know which hero, I don't care which hero, these two guys can actually just kill 5 every fight. Just invest all your resources into them. You've also got Ana being super strong in the meta, and Finn's Ana is absolutely amazing. Then, like, you can go aggressive with these players with Violet's Lucio, and like just put Coluja on whatever the heck you want. Like put him on Zarya, put him on d.va, probably Winston considering the meta. But I think this team can do well if they have just one plan going into this meta. If Kiriko comes in and like just changes everything up, I can't really predict that. But knowing the team's strengths, I think if they plan for an aggressive playstyle and put everyone on their signature heroes, rather as signature as they can be, keeping in mind the composition, that's where the Shock will excel the most. So they shouldn't really focus too much on what's the perfect composition. They should focus on which composition can they play the best, which is still okay in the meta. So that's my TED talk on the San Francisco Shock. But yeah, I think fourth place is a pretty safe bet for them. Um, and yeah, I think we can talk about the top three teams unless you have any more additions, Nightwing.
No, I just hope Krusty lays off the crack pipe and doesn't play Mikey. That's my highest uh, caliber of analysis I can really provide there. Is Krusty needs to lay off the crack pipe, please. I do not want to see that player playing in these playoffs uh, for multiple reasons, but his gameplay being one of them.
Yeah. All right. Let's bust into the top three then. Um. Yeah, Nightwing. I'm just gonna let you throw out a name here first.
Okay, the name I'm throwing out is the LA Gladiators. Now I know they won, two sub tournaments, uh, but are they really championship caliber this year? Sort of, yes, but I'm still not convinced. I feel like Reiner has been good here and there, but he's failed to be as flexible as he needed to. That said, obviously the hero that he needed to be flexible on, the Zarya, is now nerfed, so he might have the opportunity to show off on the heroes that he's actually good at, and that might genuinely be a boon for the LA Gladiators. But that's just something that sticks in my mind. Again, like I've said, these top five teams, they should really any of them be able to take uh, the championship. They all have the ability in them. It's just that I personally feel that based off of how the trajectory of these teams is going, the Gladiators are headed slightly downward. Um, but the patch just might shake that up. Obviously, they've got extreme talent in players like Kevster and Shu, but is that really enough? I don't know. Because they can't even play Patifan anymore. They've got rid of Ans. Uh, do I really believe in Happy so much coming into the team? And I personally believe like he hasn't really integrated that well into the team even now. Feel free to disagree with me, but I feel like he's not really all the way there with the team currently either. Despite him, being signed for a little while, I feel like uh, Space has not really got his head in the game. He's not really dominating. He's been consistent in the past, but is he top tier? Does he compete with any of these other tanks? I feel like he might be the worst in the sort of top four, top five. He might be the worst tank apart from Mikey in this sort of top five space, uh, based off of his performance this year. Again, feel free to correct me. Maybe I've missed a match here or there where space has really popped off. But I feel like Gladiators are just missing that final piece that makes me super confident that they'll come out with the win. I think they've got some absolutely fantastic pieces, and they definitely have the ability to win. It's just that this is not the team that I personally think will actually take it, but they for sure have the ability to do so.
Yeah, well said. I think that I agree with you that Happy hasn't quote unquote integrated well with the roster. I think Happy is just the sort of player that you just throw onto a roster and he just plays solo queue ranked for your team. That's just how it is with him. Like because you don't generally play him on team reliant heroes or into team reliant metas. You usually have like your Dantes for that, for example, when he was on the Houston Outlaws, or you have your Eileens for when he was on the Guangzhou Charge, or you have your Patafans now that he's on the Gladiators. But obviously now it's just him and Kevster manning the DPS front. Um, so it's just going to be a consistent DPS line of both of them. Um, I think it's a rock solid DPS line, but is it the perfect one for this meta? I'm not so sure because looking at the team strengths, right, it's definitely going to be Rhino's Winston at the forefront. You can put obviously you'll have Shu on the Ana, probably one of the best Anas in the world, and you're gonna have Funny Astro's Lucio because I do see this meta going in a very aggressive direction. Um, and obviously you've got Kevster who can play, your Genjis and your Tracers. Generally speaking, with these four pieces, I would want a more mobile, like go in kind of DPS. But I cannot trust Happy on the Sombra, especially now, and maybe not even on the Tracer. Even though his Tracer is decent, if you want to win the championship, you can't really put that in there. They're gonna have to play Happy on the Sojourn, which honestly is fine because Sojourn is like still an OP character. But I just feel like this team could use a little bit more oomph. I think if these players just play a full dive composition of with the exception of Happy on Sojourn, they possibly just win every fight if they are proactive enough. But then that leaves Happy vulnerable. So I don't know how exactly that's gonna work. Honestly, I'm just doing some pure guesswork here because we don't know how Kiriko's gonna be used and if she's gonna be used at all. But yeah, it doesn't give me faith that the Gladiators are gonna win, just like you, Nightwing. They do go deep, in my opinion, but maybe like losers finals, maybe winners finals. I don't know. Um, yeah, that's pretty much all I have to say on them, honestly. Uh, should we then move on and talk about the top two, being the Dynasty and the Fuel?
Yeah, so I just want to address something really quickly. There's pretty much breaking news almost. Though you, by the time you're listening to this podcast, you will have seen this. So the actual patch notes that will be sort of implemented will also have Kiriko's swift step invulnerability duration reduced from zero point 0.4 to 0.25 seconds, as officially posted by Blizzard, along with these other patch changes which are accurate. So you may not actually see Kiriko depending on how it goes,
Mm-hmm.
because you might just see people preferring the BAP Zen or the BAP Lucio. But it's also possible that Blizzard just saw that Kiriko was playing, like being played a lot, so they might, I don't know what they'll do with it really. So that's just another factor to consider, that it's not necessary that you'll actually see Kiriko come in into the playoffs, or at least be played close to the end of the playoffs, because it might just be that she's not super optimal for that. Uh, this is sort of a minor change in the whole grand scheme of things. Uh, but yeah, we'll see, I guess. So yeah, with that we can move on to the top two teams. Unless you have any thoughts about this minor change that they've done.
Um, Not really. I honestly just haven't played much competitive with Kiriko to understand how much this change actually impacts things. Because the swift step, it's the shift ability, right?
Yep.
In invulnerability during the shift ability, I don't think it makes too much of a difference in our rank at least. I don't know if it does in Masters or Grandmasters. I haven't made it to Masters yet on in Overwatch 2, but yeah, I can't really say much about it. I think we can still assume pretty much the same as we've assumed so far. Um, yeah. So yeah, which team do you think takes it? Like, which one's first, which one's second?
My heart says that the Soul Dynasty will take it. I
Ooh.
don't know. I
Ho ho.
I feel like Prophet is he's locked in, dude. He is gaming right now. I mean, this guy is carrying every single game after game. You see, Prophet just absolutely popping off. The only one from recent memory is them losing 3-2 to the Spark. Apart from that, Prophet is just beating some very many expletives uh, out of the other teams that they're against. Smurf also incredibly great performances. coming out of him, and that's why he is an MVP contender. This is one of the only teams that has two MVP contenders on their roster. Uh, Great job coming out of Iris and the support line. Windheim has been a lot more surprising than I expected, being an extremely consistent Lucio player all through the season. And he's been sort of underrated. And I think even today, if you were to ask someone, who's one of the greatest Lucios this year, you wouldn't really think of Windheim, but the results are there to show that he is incredibly solid. Uh, Even if he doesn't have the pedigree that some other players like Lee Jae-gon might, this season he has shown that he can generally, stand up to many other players at his role. Um, I think overall the Seoul Dynasty are just in the zone right now, uh, and I feel like they've got what it takes. I think the fact that the Dallas Fuel will just not be able to execute on that Zarya comp, and the fact that Fearless has barely played all season, uh, and especially in the latter half, he was just basically nowhere to be seen. Makes me feel like they won't really be able to uh, sort of execute that Winston comp as well as they might wish to. So I feel like there's just no real way that the Dallas Fuel can exploit their overwhelming advantage of having Hanbin on the Zarya anymore, unless this patch note uh, difference just fails to make any difference whatsoever. I think the Soul Dynasty, with their more well rounded system, with them using a singular tank, with Prophet locked in, and I do believe he can diff Sparkle on basically every hero, maybe apart from the Genji. Uh, Prophet is just locked in, man. I personally believe in my heart of hearts that the Soul Dynasty can take it. That said, this team has been so inconsistent in the past that my heart of hearts is shaking, it's trembling because I don't want to commit to the stake. And the shock fan in me is also screaming, proper can take it, proper can take it. Um, but there's just something about the Soul Dynasty, man. I don't know. It feels like they're dominating APAC. They've also come in and dominated the rest of the league. Uh, maybe not winning it all everywhere, but getting pretty darn close. I feel like the Soul Dynasty will be my most likely team to take it. But like I've said again, and you must be tired of hearing this by now, I think anyone in the top five can very likely take the championship cup.
Mm-hmm. So I was actually going to put the Dallas Fuel on top. Um, I'll just leave it as was earlier. Um, so I do like the Soul Dynasty a lot. Like obviously we've left them for the top two. Um, I think with d.va and Zarya being nerfed, we get to see more of the Smurf Winston, right? Which is one of the best Winstons in the league. To complement Winston, we obviously have a dive DPS, which Prophet can play to a really high level. Either the Genji or in this meta, most probably the Tracer. They have a pretty stable support line. They've got Iris and they've got. Wait, hang on. I just realized I said that Iris was on Outlaws. It's creative now. It's not Iris. Just correct that. No, we don't have an editing team, so we are not going to do that. But yeah, so they do have Iris and Vindime in their backline, which I think is like Vindime has looked pretty good. I don't think Iris has been like visibly well integrated with the roster. I think he's just playing a pretty normal flex support. Nothing extraordinary coming out of that synergy there. Um, I think it's a pretty similar problem that the Dynasty have, like compared to the Gladiators, where they will have a couple of really good looks, but other than that, they can't really commit to a playstyle because I haven't been too impressed with Fitz this season. I think although he has had some really amazing pop-off moments, he has been less consistent than usual. I also think like Stalker's Genji was good in the Junker Queen meta, sure, but can he really be put in a full dive composition alongside Prophet? Do you really want to sub Fits out? Because this meta, like I said, is leaning more towards like a more aggressive dive comp. and I don't think I can see Seoul playing that and winning the championship. So it's just a very minor complaint, obviously, because we are getting to the narrow end of things. But when you compare them to the Dallas Fuel, which, like, I did say it was probably the best team going into this season, um, they do have some really strong pieces as well. They've obviously got a really solid backline in Fielder and Chio. Like, Fielder has been like an amazing honor since the beginning of time, it seems like. And Chio has been a pretty flexible and team oriented main support. He's integrated really well, even better than Jexa was last season into this roster. Then they've got Edison, who's honestly like leveled up his sojourn a fair bit. He's a bit of a body shot bandit, but at least he like confirms those skills. Then they've got Sparkle, who's kind of the pop off player. You know, plays the Genji a lot. Can play the Tracer as well if needed. And their trump card, which is Hanbin. Like, I think Hanbin's Junker Queen is probably his best hero in this year, but we did see him pop off on the Zarya as well. And I think he's going to be one of the players that's less affected by the Zarya nerf. Like, I could still see him bust out that hero and put up an incredible performance, because his playstyle allows for that, right? He relies more on himself to like make the plays, because his team is not high resource. Like, Edison and Sparkle can both fend for themselves a lot. They back off when they need to. They take up angles that aren't too risk intensive, and like if they can do that, they I think they don't really need to play anything different than they did in this current meta, in which they were evidently one of the best teams. So on top of that, if they want, they can put the fearless Winston in. I think even though he's not been like playing consistently during the tournament matches, I think he'll have been grinding on ladder and obviously still scrimming with the team. So I don't think it's going to be a major issue if they put him in either. So look, I just feel like the Dallas Fuel strike a perfect balance between teamwork and mechanics, and this seems to be a meta which demands equal portions of both. And of course, Dallas loves going aggressive as well. Um, so yeah, I think that's why they get the edge over the Soul Dynasty, because Soul is more of a like a mechanical play making kind of team. They are not necessarily players that will use their teamwork to beat the opposition, and especially with Iris still being integrated into the roster, I think it's going to take a while before they can actually be like almost like a hive mind team like the Shanghai Dragons. So just a like very minor like minor difference in opinion over there, but I would put the Dallas Fuel above. But yeah, ultimately it's your call, Nightwing. We can do either way.
I feel like there definitely is maybe a little more evidence for the Dallas Fuel, but uh, I think there's also just something to be said about the Soul Dynasty really just being in the zone currently. I think it's probably fair based off of just overall uh, performance coming out of the Dallas Fuel. They do technically have one more league point uh, than the Soul Dynasty. I think it's fair in that sense to look at the stats and say, well, the Dallas Fuel did statistically perform better. So I think it's okay to put the Dallas Fuel up there. Um, Really, any of these top few teams can take it, so it doesn't make a huge difference either way.
I mean, I'm cool just leaving it this way, because we both know that this is going to be probably not accurate at the end of the playoffs. Um, we didn't even dare to do a bracket, guys, like just because of how long it would take and how inaccurate we knew we would be. Obviously, we will make our individual brackets at some point and maybe share them with you guys. But yeah, those are our overall thoughts on the teams that are going to be playing. Um, so yeah, this is going to be the pretty much the last episode of the Overseers before the season ends, and it's been a pretty memorable one. Obviously, the first season with Overwatch 2, and we've had fun covering this season. Like Nightwing and I said, it's been a little bit less exciting to watch overall than 6v6, just because of the diversity in plays that would happen in a setting like that. But we are not complaining as long as we are going to keep getting like frequent updates and new heroes and new maps. Like as long as they keep things fresh, I think the league is going to be a joy and a pleasure to watch. as it has been so far. So, thanks to everyone who's been following us. And if you know any more Overwatch League fans, do refer them, do send them a channel link. And yeah, we'd love to have more of you join us. Nightwing, any final words? I'm not gonna kill you, just end the episode.
Please, I have a family. Um, I think just enjoy the playoffs. This is obviously a new game. Uh, in classic Blizzard fashion, they've tried to change the patch right as we've gone to the playoffs. Teams only have about 5 days to practice, so it's as scuffed as Overwatch League is usually in playoffs. But I think this is also the best opportunity where everything is so chaotic for your favorite players to make the most hero plays they can. This is when all the stakes matter. So I think you should still be really hyped, regardless of your thoughts on Overwatch 2, regardless of your thoughts on the Battle Pass monetization, the $30 skins, by the way. Um, but I think overall, it's just been a really fun season, and I think whoever wins will have to really go through the gauntlet because there are some insanely good challenges this year, and everyone's going to be competing for that top spot. You should really look out for some insane plays coming out from every single team that's trying to clutch it and get it into this top spot. The Overwatch League has been in a sort of rough spot this year, with no sponsors, etc. Players are still grinding it through. They've made it through the transition. So I think the least you can do as a fan is, go out there, support them, uh, and just cheer for whichever team you like best. Uh, because I think this is going to be one of the most competitive seasons ever in terms of uh, just the insane level of skill at the very top. We've added so many rookies over the years that have turned into experienced veterans that currently we're at a stage where even though the game is new, we've developed such insane talent through the admittedly flawed tier 2 and tier 3 systems. We've brought so many great players into the league that now they can really duke it out and see who deserves to be the Overwatch 2 sort of season 1 champion, if you want to think of it that way. So I think this will be a really fun watch in the upcoming week.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think that about concludes it for this episode. Thanks a lot for watching, guys. Do leave a like if you liked our analyses, and we will see you after the season ends. Bye bye.